Carlos Alcaraz reveals his desire for revenge against Fritz before the Tokyo final. Carlos Alcaraz expressed his motivation and eagerness for that ATP 500 Tokyo final against Taylor Fritz. The Mercian tennis player expressed his desire for revenge after the American became his executioner during the last Laver Cup. "We are going to try to change some things," said the world number one. With his 10th final of the year already secured, Carlos Alcaraz is already setting his sights on the challenge of Taylor Fritz. The American, whom the Mercian had always been able to beat, has become the Spaniard's great challenge after what happened at the Laver Cup. Fritz found the trick to Alcaraz, and the world number one has already warned before the match that he is motivated by the challenge of facing him. "I know he's been playing great tennis lately. At the Laver Cup, against me and against Zverev, also in this tournament. He's feeling great, very comfortable on court. We're going to try to change some things." Carlos Alcaraz began explaining about the adjustments he wants to make to defeat Fritz. "I'm going to try to take the good things I did today and the good things I did at the Laver and change the bad. It's going to be a very interesting match that I'm delighted to play," the Mercian explained about those changes he intends to introduce after what happened at the Laver. The American acknowledges the importance of his win over Carlos at the Laver Cup and states that his main goal is to win a Grand Slam title. "A tireless worker, a man who has hit the same wall several times, but who perseveres in his attempt to break through his glass ceiling. Taylor Fritz is a true example of professionalism and perseverance applied to tennis, and he wants to explore his limits." Present at the ATP 500 Tokyo 2025, he spoke about what it meant for him to defeat Carlos Alcaraz in San Francisco. "Confidence is an abstract feeling, difficult to explain and quantify, especially in tennis. Many matches end up being decided by that intangible that appears in players' minds and strongly conditions their performance at crucial moments. Believing in oneself makes one play with poise, competitive ferocity, and confidence in what one does, something Taylor Fritz has sometimes lacked against the very best. The American believes that can change after having beaten Carlos Alcaraz, as he told Olympics during the ATP 500 Tokyo 2025. "For a while now, I've seen myself capable of beating the best if my tennis works perfectly. Having beaten Carlos and Sasha consecutively at the Laver Cup gives me an extra boost of confidence. It makes me see that I can do it. Obviously, those successes didn't happen in such an important tournament as a Grand Slam, but I felt nerves and pressure, and I managed them. Mentally, it's key for me to face a challenge with the peace of mind of having done it before. It's easier for me," says a man who, for example, has never been able to beat Djokovic. Already a Grand Slam finalist, as he was last year in New York, Fritz has consolidated himself in the top 10 with sublime consistency and has long been one of the firmest alternatives to the established powers. "My main goal is to win a Grand Slam. I know I can beat the best, but to regularly be at their level I need a big success that makes me see I'm at their height. After Djokovic, both Zverev and I are trying to get up to Sinner and Alcaraz's level," explains the Californian. "There are very few players who can compete head-to-head with them, even on an isolated day, and I'm working very hard to close the gap that separates me from them. Only if I'm able to win a Grand Slam title will I be able to think about other challenges, such as fighting to be the best in the world," warns a Taylor Fritz who has put behind him physical problems that hampered his performance at the start of the season, now approaching these last months of competition brimming with confidence. Champion of 2 titles so far this season, established in the top 5 and close to consolidating his spot in the 2025 ATP Finals, he has exciting months ahead, starting with this ATP 500 Tokyo 2025, where he is already in the semifinals and could once again face Carlos Alcaraz in the final. "It was a big problem to get injured after the Australian Open because I developed bad habits playing with pain. I stopped. I was at a bad level on clay, but everything changed in the grass swing. Since then, I see myself playing at a high level," concluded the American. Alcaraz breaks his ceiling. It is already the season with the most victories of his career. Carlos Alcaraz continues to push his limits and break barriers in a 2025 that is proving to be the best year of his career. Not only for having won Roland Garros and the US Open, regained the number 1 ranking and added 7 titles, but also because he has already made it the season with the most victories of his young career. After defeating Casper Ruud in the semifinals of the ATP in Tokyo, he reached victory number 66, surpassing the 65 of 2023. In his other seasons at the elite level he totaled 54 in 2024, 57 in 2022, and 32 in 2021. Ferrero reveals the aspect he works on most with Carlos Alcaraz to help him improve. Carlos Alcaraz took a short break after winning the ATP 500 in Rotterdam, the first indoor title of his career. The Mercian tennis player got rid of the bitter taste left by his elimination in the quarterfinals of the Australian Open, at the hands of an ailing Novak Djokovic. Winning in Melbourne was one of Carlos's goals for the year, since it is the only Grand Slam missing from his record, even though he is still very young and has a lot of room for improvement. His team is constantly working on the improvement of a tennis player who, with barely 4 seasons, already has a better resume than all the active players, except for Djokovic, of course. At 21 years old there is always room for improvement. Carlos is a super talented player but obviously still has many things to improve on. The mental side and consistency in matches are things he has to improve a lot. And that's the good part, we have a motivation and very clear objectives of which he is aware, said Juan Carlos Ferrero, the Spaniard's coach, on Radio Marca. Juanqui did not travel to Rotterdam, as he was resting, and was successfully replaced by Samuel Lopez, who has now become a more active part of the group. This is how Alcaraz prepares to be more consistent. The consistency Ferrero refers to is not just about hitting many balls over the net, it is not rhythm, but trying to minimize the ups and downs that Alcaraz sometimes experiences within matches, where he falls into slumps with several consecutive errors. The way they have worked on this was already explained in this newspaper by Antonio Martinez Cascales, director of the Ferrero Tennis Academy. In training sets or matches they impose conditions. For example, if he wins 3 points in a row, he gets 1 free. But on the other hand, if he is 15-0 and does not win the next point, they subtract 1, so the score instead of 15-15 is 0-15. The conditions of competition cannot be replicated, but in order to string points together in tournaments you first have to do it in training. Technically, the serve is the stroke Alcaraz works on the most and where he has the greatest room for improvement. Sinner as inspiration. In the same interview on Radio Marca, Juan Carlos Ferrero admitted that the presence of Jannik Sinner and the Italian's improvement are ultimately an extra incentive for Alcaraz. Sinner is a very complete player, he has been very aware of what he had to improve in recent years and has managed to achieve it. He has a very experienced team around him that helps him a lot. He has matured over the past year and is very aware of what he feels inside the match and what he needs to win. He's going to be a very tough rival and he will demand a lot from Carlos so that he doesn't fall asleep and continues improving, said Juanqui. Jannik himself has sometimes reflected in the same way, that having Alcaraz there is an extra reason to improve. The reunion between Alcaraz and Sinner will be in Doha. They could only meet in a hypothetical final, since they are the main seeds, as Alexander Zverev opted this season to play the Claycourt Tour in South America. Today everyone knows Carlos Alcaraz. At 22 years old, the Spaniard, recently ATP World #1 after winning another US Open, has already become one of the most successful tennis players in history. This is supported by his 23 titles on court, 6 of them Grand Slams, and the more than $50 million he has already accumulated in prize money. And all this in just 5.5 years, when he made his debut on the circuit after making his debut at the Rio Open. At that time, Alcaraz was only 16 years old. A year earlier he had met the man who to this day continues to be his coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero, who took a gamble by betting on the young tennis player. At that time, the former world #1 and Roland Garros champion was Alexander Zverev's coach, who was already ranked 3rd or 4th in the world. He was well positioned in the tennis world, yet he decided to bet everything on immersion just 15 years old. At the beginning there were many coaches and many people who, when I took Carlos, told me, "Where are you going? If you have been #1 in the world, how are you going to start traveling around by car with a kid?" I thought it through. For me it was a personal bet and also a professional growth opportunity as a coach, to work with a kid from the start and prepare him well, Ferrero admitted in a past interview on SER. The same man who already sensed the potential Carlos Alcaraz could have when he saw him for the first time at just 12 years old at the Ferrero Tennis Academy, located in Vienna, Alicante, created and directed by Ferrero himself after reaching ATP World #1 back in September 2003. An academy through which other players such as Pablo Carreño, Mario Vilella, Carlos Gimeno or Eva Guerrero have also passed. I saw him for the first time when he was 12 or 13 years old. He came to the academy and we trained one day. He was very small but you could see that everyone was talking about him. He had everything he is now, but in miniature, he confessed. He was a string bean, he had speed, but no muscles, but we did see something very special, he specified. At 14 years old and without physical strength he competed against very tough rivals for him, something that always amazed Ferrero, who knew that the hardest part was still to come in the years ahead.